Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Stitch Sessions. This week we are working on these cute little bunny square motifs. Easter is just around the corner, and many of us will most likely not be able to spend Easter time with our loved ones. So I thought it was kind of a fun little project we can work on during this time of quarantine and self-isolation. So it is quite an easy motif to make. Once you understand the principles of crocheting a circle, we then take that circle and turn it into a square. Now I added some little ears here for my bunny and a ridge here for the face. And that's the thing that I'll spend a little extra time on if you're a little newer to crochet. It is very doable. I think you'll dive into it and be quite surprised with yourself at how reasonable it is to accomplish this motif. Now I left mine without a face. I just kind of liked the mystery and the quirkiness of that. So I made another one here in the cotton yarn. And this is the one that we'll be doing the tutorial on. And the reason why is because this velvet yarn, although it's divine and lovely at the feel, it is very difficult to see your stitches in real life, much less on camera. So I didn't want to frustrate any of the newer crocheters. So the tutorial is going to be done in this cotton yarn and following the same pattern to create your bunny face. And of course, we've got to sew those ears on. So yeah, it's a sweet, fun little project. Now stay tuned because this motif here is going to be part of another project. So this little guy here will not stop here, but you can use this motif for anything you want. Most especially some people would automatically think about making afghans or baby blankets, even pillows, like a pillowcase or something like that. I actually have a special project that I'm going to be working on with my little guy. So stay tuned because that tutorial will be coming out sooner than later. But in the meantime, let's get cracking on our bunny squares. So let's grab all of our materials and let's get stitching. Okay, so to make your bunny square, these are the materials you're going to need. Now I used this beautiful velvet yarn. For the tutorial, I'm going to use this cotton blend and cotton yarn just because it's going to make it a little bit easier for you to see the stitches. And as lovely and beautiful as this yarn is, can be a little bit tricky to see on camera. And also if you are a super, super beginner, I know how tempting it is to just work with this luscious yarn, but you want to be very, very patient if you do decide to use this yarn, because if you're inexperienced, it can be a little tricky to find your stitches. But like anything, with lots of practice, you will be a-okay. So for this particular square, I used the Bernat Baby Crushed Velvet. This called for using a 4.5 millimeter hook. It's considered a medium weight size 4. I ended up using a 5 millimeter hook for this project, okay? And then I just found that helped the stitches sit a little bit looser. Now, one thing I do want to kind of let you all know is the gray that I used is also a Bernat Velvet. I don't have the label for it, unfortunately. Fortunately for me, I was gifted this ball of yarn by one of my crochet students, and it is, I have to say, these velvet yarns are just beautiful to work with. This is still considered a medium 4, but it is definitely a bit thicker than this one here. So really, I should have used a 5.5 hook when I was doing the pink and then gone down to the 5 for the gray, just so that they sit evenly. So for you, if you would like to stick with these two colorways, I would make sure to get both the gray and the pink in the Baby Crushed Velvet or in the regular velvet. Whatever your two contrasting colors are, just try to make sure that they're in the same weight category. Now, these two probably will be labeled in the same weight category, but that's why it's important to kind of, feel the strands and see how they look to you. Okay, and in case you're wondering about the color, this color is Crystal Pink Potpourri. And I'm not actually sure what the shade of this gray is. It's in between a super dark gray and a very light gray, which does nothing to help you. But in any case, I'm sure when you go to the store, you're going to find the two colors that, that work for you. So I'm just going to set these guys aside. And again, just as a reference, I've already done one here. Now, my ears, I will be sewing these down. Just so that it looks really nice. And if you're making this for a blanket, for example, you know, you just don't want it to end up flopping down because then it loses the essence of the bunny shape. Okay, so pretty how that came out. So it's just this really pretty velvet, and we just used a little accent color around the edge. Okay, and as always, you're going to need a handy pair of scissors and your trusty yarn needle in order to sew in all your ends later on. So let's get started on our bunny square. So to begin our bunny square, we are going to start from the center and work our way out. So we're going to start with the bunny's face and head, and then move out to the ears before we start to work the background. Okay? So we are going to begin with a cinch circle. Okay, and if you're not familiar with a cinch circle, we'll leave a link to our cinch circle tutorial down below. But since we're working on it right here, I'd just like to remind people that a cinch circle is basically an unresolved slip knot. Okay, so I just insert my hook, pull up a loop, and I don't pull it so that it knots. I leave it as is, and then I chain one to secure. Just like that. And I make sure that that short tail gets moved. Now we're going to proceed to chain two more. Okay. Your chain three here will count as a double crochet. It equals the height of a double crochet stitch. We're now going to double crochet 12 times inside our cinch circle. So we'll yarn over, insert into the circle, pull through, and resolve our double crochet. And if you're unfamiliar with the double crochet, if you're super new, we have lots of crochet basics tutorials in a playlist we have called Crochet Basics. So we'll make sure to link that down below for you. I'm going to do a couple here nice and slow. So you're yarning over and inserting. So you have 3, yarn over again, pull through 2, and pull through 2. Okay, so far I have 1, 2, 3, 4. Remember, this chain 3 will count as 1. We want to have 12 into the circle. So go ahead and place 12, and I'll meet you back up when we're ready to cinch our circle. And this is my 12th one here. So I have 12 double crochets in my circle, and now we're going to cinch this circle shut. So this is why you always want to make sure you're working over that tail, because now we're going to take that tail and we're going to pull on it, and just like that, it's going to cinch the center of your circle shut. And you'll have to do an extra little pull there, and there you go. Okay, so your work looks like that. And then we're going to slip stitch to the top of that chain 3. I'm going to move that tail back there. So 1, 2, and 3, and I'm going to slip stitch to join my round. So just pull it through and pull it through. And there you have a circle. Okay, so we're now going to be working in the round. So let's move on to round 2. We're going to chain 3 at the beginning of every round. But what we're going to do now is we're not going to count this chain 3 as anything. We're just going to use it to help us create the height we need. So for round 2, what we're going to do is we're going to place 2 double crochets into each stitch all the way around. So at the end of round 2, we're going to have 24 stitches. We started with 12 stitches in round 1. So if we do 2 in each, we're going to have 24. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to yarn over, and I'm going to place 1 double crochet right away into that very first stitch where I slip stitched out of. Okay, so for now it looks like there's 2 in that stitch, and I'll address that when we come to the end of the round. So into the very next stitch, what we're going to do is we're going to place 2 double crochets. So there's 1 and there's 2. So we're increasing all of our stitches, which will help our work stay flat. Okay, and some of you may have seen our how to crochet a circle tutorial, and that one goes a little bit slower, and it gives you the basic knowledge of how to create circles. So if you want to dive deeper into that one, I'll leave a link for it in the description box down below as well. It's a great tool to creating other projects. Okay, so I've done 2 double crochets into each stitch, and if I pull that apart you can see that nicely. So I'm going to leave you to do the rest until we come up to the end here, and I'm going to meet up with you. And then we're going to talk about finishing round 2. Okay, so I've just done my last increase here, and this is normally what we would call a false stitch because it looks like a space, but it's where we slip stitched out of. So we usually would not crochet into this. Now, because I am choosing to ignore this chain 3 for this particular project, we are actually going to go into that. So remember we did our we did 1 double crochet, so each stitch has to get 2, right? So I'm going to ignore this chain 3, and in fact I am going to go right into that same space. So I'm going to go over that false stitch. I'm going to double crochet so it looks like these 2 are coming out, and I'm just going to ignore this chain 3, and I'm going to go right into the top of that double crochet stitch. So it cinches in your work just like that. And sometimes I like to do that because I just find it just smooths out that rounded shape, and it just pushes that chain 3 to the back, so the seam that inevitably comes with making circles kind of disappears. So what we've done is we've created the face of our little bunny. So if we look at it here, there was our first round and there was our second round. So what we want to do now is create a nice little edging for the shape of the bunny's head. And I like doing this because it just gives the motif a little bit more texture. Okay, so that's what we're going to move on to next for round 3. So for round 3, we're going to work single crochet stitches. So we're going to chain 1 to begin this row or round, and we're not going to do any increases, and we're only going to work into the front loops. Okay, so here would be your back loop, here is your front loop right there. Okay, so the tops of your stitches have 2 loops. The front one is the one closest to you, the back is the one furthest from you. So right here, what we're going to do is we're going to work into the very next stitch, and we're going to work into that front loop there, and we're going to insert our hook, pull up a loop, yarn over, and pull through. Single crochet. And we're going to go into the very next stitch into the front loop only. And there's 2 reasons why we're working into the front loops only. So one is to create that nice textured ridge, and also this leaves the back loops free to then begin our background, which in that case was the gray. And I like using loops because then you're able to maintain the ridge, work the background without disturbing that little ridge. And you'll see that once we get to it. But for now, you're just going to go into each and every single front loop, and you're just going to single crochet. Easy peasy, no increases to worry about. You're going to do this all the way around until you get to the end. Okay, once I've finished my round 3 with 1 single crochet into the front loops only, my work is looking like that. You can see it's really curled up, and that is exactly what we want. Okay, so we're going to finish off this round with a slip stitch. and we're going to slip stitch also into the front loop. Now remember, this right here is a false stitch. We're going to go right into the front loop of the very next single crochet, and we're just going to slip stitch to join, just like that. So we now have finished the face and the head outline of our bunny. Okay, so if I compare that, so you see it actually will sit nicely like that. Okay, so all that's left now is to create our sweet little ears. Okay, so let's start with the right ear. So what we're going to do is we are going to chain 8. Okay, once you've chained 8, you want to make sure it's not twisted. And a little something I forgot to mention to those of you that are really tight crocheters, I really recommend you be diligent and try to relax these stitches a little bit. I know here we want it to curl up, but if you crochet super tight, it's just actually going to close in that circle and you're going to lose the essence of kind of what we're trying to achieve here. So just be careful. Try and relax your stitch a wee bit more, okay? So we're starting the base of the ear here, and we've created our 8 chains. And now we're going to work our way back. So in the second chain from the hook, right there, we're going to do a slip stitch. Okay. In the next chain, we're going to do a single crochet. In the following stitch, we're going to do a half double crochet. So we'll pull through all 3 loops. In the next stitch, we're going to do 2 double crochets. So we're going to do an increase in that chain. So we're going to yarn over, insert. You'll pull through the first 2, and you will yarn over to pull through the second 2. Now we're going to work the same stitch right back into that same chain. And don't worry if it's stretching out a little bit, that's normal. But it will all settle in once we finish our work. Okay, so you can see the shaping of the ear is starting to take place there. Okay, so next what we're going to do is we are going to, so what we've done is we've stretched towards a taller height, and now we're going to go back down. So what we want to do is we want to do a half double crochet into the next stitch. Whoops. Okay. And then we're going to do a single crochet into the following stitch. And then we're going to do a slip stitch in this last chain right here. Oops. And there you've created your first bunny ear. So it's got a little bit of kind of bend to it, which is what we wanted. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to slip stitch into the very next stitch, and I'm still going to stay in the front loops here. So I'm going to slip stitch into the next stitch that belongs to the circle. So you see that was my last one, or my very first chain. I'm going to slip stitch right into that same space, which is in fact where we joined our circle. Just like that. So now we've really solidified our ear. See, now you can really see it's starting to look like a bunny. Now what we're going to do is we're going to slip stitch into the next 3 stitches into the front loops only. So again, I'm just going to make sure that I'm going to insert my hook only into the front loops. So there's 1. There's 2. And here is the 3rd one. Whoops. There we go. So we just kind of slip stitched over across the top of the head there. And now we're going to work on the second ear. And I just want you to see that I did not make the ears exactly the same. So I felt that it just gave the bunny a little bit of character. So this one ear is bent this way, and then this one is kind of slanted out, but not as bent. And I just think it gives the bunny a little bit of character. Okay, so that's what we're going to do for the left ear, and that would be the left ear facing you, but it would actually be the bunny's right ear. So we're still going to chain 8 again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And we're going to make our way back down the chain, but this time what we want to try and do is work into the back of the chain. The reason why is it will just allow the ear to sit nicely when it lays flat, okay? So just turn the chain over slightly so you can kind of see the back bumps. We're going to skip the first chain and go into the second one. So I just turned it over so I could see where it is. And I'm not going to worry about working into the bumps. Some people would do that. I'm going to go right into the chain there, and I'm going to slip stitch. Into the next chain, I'm going to do a single crochet. So very similar to what we did in the other ear. I'm going to insert, pull up, and chain 2. Into the next chain, I'm going to do a half double crochet. Now what I'm going to do for the next 2 stitches is I'm going to stitch 2 double crochets together, which some people would consider a decrease. Okay, so we're going to yarn over, insert your hook into the very next chain, and pull up a loop, yarn over and pull through the first 2 loops just like you would do a double crochet, but we're not going to resolve this stitch yet. We're going to leave the 2 loops on the hook. We're going to yarn over and go into the very next chain and do the same thing. So you'll pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through the first 2 loops, 3 loops will remain. And now we're going to yarn over and pull through all 3. So what this does is it kind of bends it that way, just a smidge. And now into the next chain, we're going to just do a half double crochet because we're going to work our height back down again. And then in the last stitch here, we're just going to work a single crochet stitch. Okay, and be careful, my face got twisted around, so it's going to be easy to get confused. Make sure that your face is always facing you, and the first ear you're working on is to your right, so it's going to sit nice and flat. This ear that we just created is going to go that way, okay? So be careful that you don't want to try and start stitching back that way. I mean, you'll figure it out once you turn the face over. But lastly, what we want to do is we just want to slip stitch into the front loop of the very next stitch, which falls on the head or the face of the bunny, and we just slip stitch to join, and we're finished the bunny's face and ears. I love how this ear kind of, because it'll go in different directions, and I think it just makes it look so cute. It's got a lot of personality. Okay, so now what we're going to do is you're going to snip your yarn, and your bunny face is complete. Okay, so I am actually, instead of chaining 1 after this, I'm going to pull this right through, and then I would use my darning needle, and I am going to very subtly just weave this in. So I'm just going to go right under that first loop. I'm going to go through the whole stitch, because what I'm going to do is I'm taking this completely to the back, just like that. And then it just gets kind of hidden. And then what I'll do is I will weave it in somewhere in the back here to hide it. And I want to make sure that I'm not going to get in the way of these loops, because remember, well, because we are actually going to work into these loops. So be very careful. If you decide to weave this in right now, like I'm contemplating, I am going to just sneak in under and sneak it that way. Okay. I don't want to impede access to this back loop here, because when we start working on the background, which is next, we need those loops. Okay. So just keep that in mind. I have done that many a boo-boos when I didn't pay attention, and I did entire projects only to realize I had to unravel it all. But that's okay. That helps strengthen your patience. So I'm going to continue on and weave this end in and hide this tail as well. So that way the back will be nice and flat. But here you have it, gang. Now, this on its own can be its own applique. So you don't necessarily have to turn this into a square. You can fasten this onto other projects. Like maybe you're working on an Easter basket, kind of like the one we did last year. And I'll leave a link for that down below if you want to make a little Easter basket. It was so well received for the children who I made them for. You can place this on a sweater, all kinds of things, a scarf, a hat. Like it can just be a wonderful little applique all on its own. Okay. Now, if you'd like to make it as part of a motif, like maybe you're going to use this for a blanket or anything else that you want to use in a modular fashion, having the ability to turn this circle into another shape is a really great option. And you can also find several tutorials where I've taken a circle shape and transformed it into other shapes like a hexagon or an octagon. So you can check all those out as well. I'll leave those in the description box down below. Lots of cool resources that you can look into in some of our playlists. So now let's go on to creating our background and eventually squaring this off to create a square motif. So what we're going to do, and again, I'm not using the velvet on camera because I don't think it's going to show the stitches very well. I'm just using a little bit of this leftover cotton I have here, and this is Bernat Handicrafter. And in case you're wondering, it's called Hot Pink is the color, okay? And first of all, I have these lying around, and second of all, I just thought it would be a fantastic contrast there. So let's begin our background. So now all we're going to do is we're going to create the background, and how we're going to do that is we're going to go into those back loops. Remember, we were just working into the front loops when we did the outline of the face. So now we're going to work into the back loops. So we're going to take our contrasting color and place a slip knot on your hook. And then we want to find our back loops here. Okay, so they should be fairly easy to see because they'll create this little ridge here. Okay, so sometimes I like to start somewhere behind the ear where I can hide that. So we're just going to start here. Doesn't really matter where, as long as you can see where you need to go and you're comfortable with it. So we're going to slip stitch to join. And then we're going to go back into using our double crochet. So we're going to chain 3. 1, 2, and 3. And so if you remember, our second round had 24 stitches. The third round, which is the back loops we're working into, these are the back loops of round 2. We didn't increase this ridge, and that's why it curled up. So we need to increase the number of our stitches again. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into the very next back loop, and I want to make sure I don't accidentally go into this ridge here, which is what I did. Oh yeah, no, that's correct. So you don't want to accidentally go into here because that's the top of your face outline. So we don't touch these single crochets here, we go behind them. So it's not this ridge here, it's this one here. So I'm going to go into the very next one beside it, because remember, this is right behind the ear. So I'm going to go right here, and I am going to do another single crochet stitch. Okay. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to place another one. So I am going to increase here. So we have an increase, another double crochet. So there's 2 and 1. Now I'm going to go into each of the next 2 stitches and place 1. Okay guys, sorry, let me just back up on something because I realized I skipped a row in the formula. So when we started our face, we did 12 stitches. In the second round of the face, we ended up having 24 stitches, and that's because we increased in every single stitch all the way around. So we went from 12 to 24. So then we maintained 24 when we did those single crochets around, which gives us the little ridge of our face. And now when we started on our background color, we're now back to increasing. And what I had previously explained is that we were doing an increase and then 2 individual stitches before an increase. This is not enough of an increase at this point to keep our work flat. So I just need to take that out. And I wanted to show you guys. So my apologies. For round 3, we are going to do an increase, which is 2 stitches in 1. Remember, I'm going to eventually ignore that. And then we're only going to do 1 double crochet, and in the next one we're going to do an increase. So I've already got 1 stitch in there, and of course we're working into the back loops only. So I'm going to go right back in and double crochet. So this is the pattern, or the formula as I like to call it, for round 3. So it will be 1 individual stitch, not 2. And then into the next one will be your increase. Okay, so there's only going to be 1 double crochet between your increase stitches. Okay, just like that. So your work should be increase, double crochet, increase, double crochet, increase, double crochet, or 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1 all the way around. Okay, guys? So go ahead and do that, and I'll meet you at the end of round 3. And I'm just creating my last increase here. And remember, in this project, I am just ignoring this chain 3. So I'm going to do my last individual stitch right in there. Just going to sneak it in there. It's behind the ear, so it's a little easier to hide. Just like that. Okay, and perfect. And so now we're going to close off our round by slip stitching into the top of the very first stitch here. So remember, I said I was going to ignore that chain 3, so I'm going to slip stitch into there, and that just creates a nicer join, and it's right behind the ear there. There we go. So now we have 36 stitches in round 3. And it's really important to maintain your stitch count, especially when we are working our way outward, because later on when we square off, it'll make for a really important technique to make sure that you have the same number of stitches on each side and each corner. And believe me, I have made this mistake, which I was just about to do here when I had skipped ahead and had the wrong number of stitches, and then it kind of skewed off my formula to square off. So round 3, 36 stitches. We're now going to go into round 4, which is the pattern that I had started to do previously. And so I had just jumped the gun a little bit there, and I'll just do it again really quick for you. So round 4, which is going to be the last of our rounds in the circular round before we square off. We're going to chain 3 again, And this time we are going to do 2 individual stitches before we increase, as opposed to just 1 individual between each increase. Now for now, I am going to count this as 1, but at the very end, I will ignore it. So we have 1. Now we're going to do another double crochet into the very next stitch. So that will give us our 2 stitches, and now we're going to increase. And this will be the formula for round 4. Okay, so 1, 2, and there's the increase. Okay, so again, I'm going to place 1 double crochet in the next, 1 double crochet in the very next one. So there's our 2. And now we're going to increase, which means we're placing 2 stitches in 1. So there's 1, and there is 2. Okay, so we have 1, 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, and so on. So do that all the way around to the end, and at the end of round 4, we will now have 48 stitches, which will be perfect for us to be ready to start squaring off our work. And I'm just in my last increase here. And this is my 48th stitch. So we're getting ready to slip stitch to join, but remember I said in this project I'm ignoring these chain 3s. So I'm actually going to go right into what we would normally call the false stitch, which is right there. And I'm going to replace that chain 3 with an actual double crochet. And I'm just going to ignore that chain 3, and I'm going to slip stitch at the top, whoops, at the very top of that double crochet instead of the chain 3. So I'm going to slip stitch to join. Okay. So there we have, our background is done. You can see our little bunny face is there. And now we're ready to start creating our square shape. Okay, so here we go. Now, just before we start shaping our circle into a square, I just want to go over a couple of things. First of all, you want to understand or remember what makes a square. A square has 4 sides and 4 corners. So we want to keep that in mind when we start thinking about how to shape this circle into a square. So if I just bring back our original bunny here. So we've got the 4 sides and the 4 corners. So we have to remember how many stitches did we end up with in this circle. So at the end of round 4, you're going to have 48 stitches. So you want to divide that number by 4. Okay, and this is a basic principle for changing any of your circles into whatever other shape that you're looking to do. So when we've talked about previously in other tutorials, like how to create a triangle shape, which we've got a tutorial on, I'll put the link for it down below. And so it's always about asking yourself, how many sides are there and how many corners? Maybe you're going to do an octagon or a hexagon, which we've done tutorials on that as well. So for a square, we know it's 4 sides, 4 corners. So once I've divided the number of stitches I have here into 4, so 48 stitches divided by 4 is 12. That tells me that in every 12th stitch, I need to create a corner. So that's the first thing. Now, the other thing, because we've got a little motif in the center, like in this case, the bunny, you want to ask yourself, how do you want the face to lay? Would you like it to lay perfectly aligned, straight upwards? Or like this one, I ended up creating the square so that the bunny's face was a little bit offset. Hopefully you can see that. So you can see it's not the top of the head isn't perfectly centered to the top of the square side. So that's something you want to keep in mind before you decide where to begin your first corner. So I always like kind of quirky little angles like that. So I am not going to square off this square. And so that is what I'm going to keep in mind as I begin to shape this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start kind of halfway through the flat side. Okay, so I'm basically starting somewhere around the center of my flat side. So to begin, I'm going to chain 1, and then I'm going to go back into that same stitch and I'm going to do a half double crochet. Okay, now I'm going to go into each of the next 3 stitches and do another half double crochet. So we don't want to get too high just yet, because as we get closer to creating a corner, we want to show a gradual increase in the height of our stitches so that we have a nice smooth looking side. So there we have 4 half double crochets. Now we're going to start to increase. So remember, because we have a corner, we know that the stitches, see, it's going to come to a point like that. See, even with the yarn, you can see it's coming to a point. So we have to make sure that the stitches right at the corner are going to be tall enough so that our side lays flat. Now I'm going into a little extra detail for those of you that like understanding the theory behind things. Otherwise, if you're just happy to follow along, then hey, good for you. Just follow along. And so in the next stitch, I'm going to now place 2 double crochets, into each of the next 2 stitches. So I'll yarn over once and then insert into the next and double crochet. So you can see that it's already starting to gain in height. Now we're going to increase our height a little bit more, and we're going to use a triple crochet. We do have a tutorial on this stitch if you want to dive deeper into it, and I'll leave it in the description box down below. But I'm going to just walk you through it right here. So you will yarn over 2 times for a triple crochet. You'll go into the very next stitch, pull up a loop. For triples, you're going to have 4 loops on your hook right now. You'll then yarn over, pull through the first 2 loops only. You'll remain with 3 loops. You'll yarn over and you'll pull through the next 2, which leaves you with 2, and you'll yarn over 1 more time to pull through the last set. So you're pulling through 2 loops 3 times, and that's why we call it a triple crochet. Now in UK terms, I believe it's called a double triple. So just in case you hear that term as well. So now you can really see that we're ramping up towards our corner, and now we're going to create our corner. Okay, so our corner, for those of you that remember the granny square principles, consists usually of a stitch and then some kind of a chain space and a stitch back in that same space. So for us, we're going to create our corner by placing 1 triple crochet, chain 2, and a triple crochet back into that same stitch. Now, how you form your corners will vary depending on how big your circles become. Like if we had continued to make several more rounds of circle before squaring off, we may indeed need more stitches to create our corner. Okay, but for now we've done 4 rounds, so this is going to be plenty for us. So in the very next stitch, we're forming our corner, and that means we're going to place a triple crochet, pull through 2 and pull through 2, and again. Now we're going to chain 2, and I always remind those of you that are very tight crocheters, go ahead and chain 3 for your corners, okay? That'll just give you a little bit more give for your work to lay flat. We'll then go back into the same stitch and place another triple crochet. And this will form your first official corner. Okay, so you can see there, if I lay that flat, okay, so our corner is there. You can see our bunnies there. So you can see now definitely a side is forming. Okay, now we're going to work down the side and we will work a full side. So now you will get the full effect of squaring off our work. So anytime we go down alongside, we're going to begin with 1 triple crochet. So now we're going to work down in height. So we're starting from the tallest stitch and working our way down. Into the next 2 stitches, we're going to place a double crochet. There's 1, and there's the second one. So now we're going to place a half double crochet stitch into each of the next 5 stitches. So we'll yarn over, insert, and pull through all 3. Okay, so now we've gone back down in height, and this is all done to flatten the side. 3, 4, and 5. Okay, so now if I lay that down and really sharpen up my corner there, you can see now we've got a full corner and a side happening here. Okay, now we're going to start building up our height again to create our next corner. So we want to place 1 double crochet into each of the next 2 stitches. So we'll yarn over, insert, pull through 2, and pull through 2. Then we'll do the same thing in the next stitch. 1 double crochet. And lastly, we're going to place a triple crochet, which means we're going to yarn over twice, insert our hook, and pull through 3 times. Okay. So in total, now I have, I'm using cotton yarn, so it's really kind of bending to the heat of my hand here. So I just love how his bunny ears flop like that. So there you go. So we've got a full side. Now remember, we had 48 stitches in total, so we know that in every 12 stitches, because a square has 4 corners, 48 divided by 4 is 12. In every 12 stitch is where we're going to form our corner. So this next stitch should be our 12th stitch. So if I just come back here, now I'm not counting this stitch because it belongs to this corner. So this is going to be our first full side. So we begin with a triple, 2 doubles, 5 half doubles, and then 2 double stitches, double crochets, and then a triple, okay? So if I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So the next one is our 12th, and you know what that means. We're going to create our corner. So we are going to place a triple crochet into the next stitch. And then chain 2 and place another triple crochet into that same stitch. So there's 1, 2, and 3. Okay, so now we've got something that looks like this. Okay, so now we've got 2 official corners that we can work out of. Okay, and if you remember our bunny, now we can see where our bunny's going to lay here. So he's just slightly, actually this one ended up being pretty square on, if I do say so. So yeah, it all depends on how you want the bunny to sit. Now, some people might have started right away with the corner right here, which might make it a little easier for you to just count and start understand where you are with the types of stitches, you know, for your triples, your doubles. But I always like to kind of play with it a little bit to see if I've got like a face motif. Then those of you that did the little lamb motif, you'll notice that some of my lambs were a little offset, but that's kind of how I like it. I like it to be quirky like that. So that's totally up to you. So hopefully this makes sense to you. And so you understand how to create your side and how to create your corner. So I am going to leave you to finish the next 2 corners, and then I'm going to meet back up with you when you're just coming back up to finish your 4th. And I do have one little thing I'm just going to chit chat about before I let you go do that, and that is this. There are a lot of crocheters out there that in fact would do more than just 1 triple, chain 2 and a triple in a corner. Some would actually do 2 triple crochets, chain 2, 2 triples, or chain 3 and 2 triples. It really depends on your preference, how big, so your preference, meaning, you know, how you like the look of it, if you like it to sit a little bit more snug. It will also depend how tight of a crocheter you are. If you're really super tight, absolutely, you're going to need to do 2. Some people might even do a full shell stitch in here. They might do 3 triple crochets, chain 2 and 3. And that brings me to the fact that, and I mentioned this previously, it also depends on how large your circle is before you start to square it off, okay? So the larger the circle, the more stitches, obviously along the sides, you're going to need to create your sides. And most likely the more stitches you'll need in that corner space to really shape it around the corner. I know that sounds funny. We're talking about squares and rounding off, but now, if you're super new and all of this just sounds like a lot of double talk, do not worry one bit. Just follow the pattern we've done so far and you will have a nice squared off bunny face, and we'll continue on from there, okay? So just continue on with the next side. You'll do 1 triple, 2 doubles, 5 half doubles, 2 doubles, a triple, and then you'll do another corner and then continue on. Okay, so finish off your square, and I'm going to meet back up with you in this corner. And I'm just finishing up my last corner here with my triple crochet increase. And so now I'm back up to my very first side that I started. So now you can see, and I like to take the corners and stretch them out there. Now you can see how my bunny is sitting just ever so slightly offset in my square. So we are going to triple crochet into the next stitch, and then into the next 2 stitches we're going to double crochet. So we're working our way back down to those half double crochet heights and those half double crochet stitches we started with. Okay, and then we've got 1 stitch left. So remember, this is a false stitch here. We're going to double crochet into there, but in this case I am going to stitch into it because we are ignoring all of our chain stitch beginnings. So I've got 1 more in there, and then I'm just going to slip stitch to join at the very top of the first official stitch, which is right there. And there we have it, guys. So we have just, sorry, my camera angle makes it look like it's elongated, but we have just taken our circle and turned it into a square. Okay, now I know it's probably still not looking super sharp in the corners. It depends on the type of yarn and how tight you stitch. With cotton, I find it tightens up a little bit more. So this would actually make a really cute hot pad or a coaster, now that I think about it. So, but there we have it. We've taken our circle and created a square. And now I'm just going to take you through how to place a nice little border. So like I had done in this previous square, especially if you're going to take this motif and make several of them to create like maybe a blanket, a baby blanket, or a throw of some kind. I always find that having a border to anchor your motifs is always really, really nice. If you don't want to do a border, you can stop here and just create your other motifs. and then sew them together. I would recommend you then weaving in, sewing down your ears. And we have done this in several other projects, most especially when we did the penguin pillow. And I'll leave a link for that in the description box down below. But it's super easy. You're just going to whip stitch it and just make sure that you're picking up these loops here. And you really want to try and not go in through the back. So the only thing you want to see on the back of your square, once I weave that in, is just your original square and then the color. You don't want to see any other yarns coming through there. Okay, so that's my recommendation. But in the meantime, let's talk about our border. And I am going to snip my yarn here and reintroduce that cream color for our border. Okay, so I'm just going to snip that there. And I'm just going to knot that, and then we'll work over that short tail. Okay, we are ready to go. Okay, so what you want to do is with your contrasting color, you want to place a slip knot on your hook. Okay, and then you can either start in a corner or you can start along a side. Depending on my mood, I don't like to start in the same place I knotted off because I like to be able to work over that nice and smoothly. So I'm going to start somewhere around here. And I am going to slip stitch to join. And for this border, I'm just going to use a half double crochet border. Now you can use a single crochet if you like. What I did here is I used a half double crochet just because it gave me a little bit more height and because of the type of yarn that I was using here. It just gave me a little bit nicer texture. Now, one thing I am going to do, and actually I need to undo that because I like to add texture in very simple ways. Instead of going through the whole stitch, I'm just going to work into the back loop. So that is actually where I'm going to attach, whoops, my slip stitch there. So I'm going to slip stitch. Oops. I'm going to slip stitch to join. Then I'm going to chain one. And right back into that same stitch, I'm going to do a half double crochet. And so this border round is going to be very easy because the half double crochet is all we're going to do. So you're just going to yarn over and into the back loops only. We're going to work one half double crochet into each stitch into the back loops. So I'm going down through the top of the stitch and not into the whole side of the stitch. So you can already start to see that it's pushing that front loop forward and it's just creating a nice little ridge effect there. Okay, so I'm going to do this all the way to the corner here. Okay, and this is the last stitch before my corner. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another corner inside the previous corner. So I'm going to half double crochet into the corner space like that. Okay, I'm going to chain two again. And then I'm going to half double crochet back into that same corner space. Okay, so I'm maintaining the pattern here. Oops. Okay, so you can see that we're now able to round the corner. Now, some people would do two half double crochets, chain two half double. That's a total personal preference, completely up to you. I like to then kind of squish those in together. I'm pretty happy with just doing one. So you may see that done and that's a-okay. Now, here's the thing when we come out of a corner. It is very easy to skip this and go here. sometimes what happens is when we've worked in the space, this loop gets hidden. And it's really important that we always remember to push this out of the way and get that very first stitch in. Otherwise, it will mess up our stitch count, okay? So I'm going to yarn over and go into the top loop there of that very first stitch and pull through, okay? Now I'm off to the races. I'm in a regular side here, and I'm just going to place 1 half double crochet into each and every single stitch until I get to my corners, and then I will repeat that pattern. Okay, so I'm just going to lay that flat there. Okay, so cotton can be funny because it really molds to the heat of your hands, especially. So now if you find, see, I'm using almost 2 different weights of yarn. So if you find that something like this starts to happen where you feel like, it's kind of not sitting as flat as you would like it to be, I would then definitely go back in here and do 2 half double crochets, chain 2 half double crochets, okay? And in fact, I think that's what I'm gonna do here. So, and I like doing stuff like this because it shows you guys that, especially you newer crocheters, that, you know, this really is a malleable art. Like sometimes you just gotta change or deviate a wee bit from your original plan there. Okay, so I've done 2 half double crochets, chain 2, and now 2 more half double crochets. Oops. Into that corner. So that's sitting a little bit better. Now, I will say that when I worked with this velvet yarn, I did not do that. I only did 1. See, you can see 1 and 1. Again, it was a little thicker and it sits differently. So that's why it's important to kind of gauge the look that you're happy with. Okay, so in this case, we did place 2. Okay, and then of course, again, I make sure that I don't lose this stitch here, and I place 1 half double into each. Okay, and I'm just going to show you, I'm coming up to where we knotted off. So that stitch is right here. So don't confuse the knot with that stitch. So I'm going to go right into the back loop, and it got a little bit tight there. Okay, and now this is the knot, so I'm just going to pull it a little tighter, and I'm going to ignore it. Okay, so I'm going to go into the very next stitch, which is here. I am going to try and work over that tail though, and I'm going to insert my hook right there, and I'm off to the races. Okay, just like that, and in again. So just so you guys can see, just like that. Yeah. So, and that's why I like to start away from that knot, and then I can just work over it and it smooths out my work there. So that is it, guys, for your border. So go ahead and finish off your border, and I'll meet you back here at the end. So remember, it's just 1 stitch into each stitch. In the corners, for this particular yarn, which is a thinner cotton yarn, I did 2 half doubles, chain 2, 2 half doubles. If indeed you are using the velvet yarn, I only used 1 half double, chain 2, 1 half double. Remember though, if you are a tight crocheter, you will need the 2 stitches, 2, chain 2, 2. Okay? All right, guys, I'll meet you shortly. Okay, guys, and I'm just coming up to slip stitching my round here, and I'm going to go into the top of that half double crochet right there, and I'm going to slip stitch to join the round. Okay, and there we have our bunny square. And there you can see it just sits slightly offset, which is what I like. I just like a little bit of quirkiness to it. So then we'll just snip off our yarn here. Now you can do two rounds. I'm just going to weave that in there later. I did 2 rounds for the velvet yarn because it was sitting really, I found that 1 round was kind of chintzy. So I did do 2. So if you're following exactly with the velvet yarn, you want to do 2. And I also worked into the back loops only. So you just get a little bit of really nice texture. And there you have it. And I'll just have to sew on my bunny ears there. So I really hope that you've enjoyed working on this cute little project, especially with Easter just around the bend here. And hopefully it's brought a little bit of sunshine to your day. I know many of us have been still working through the global quarantine and trying to keep ourselves busy while staying healthy and active and creative and all those fun things. So I hope this has brought a little smile to your face. And for those of you that are making this for a blanket, you would just proceed to make as many of these as you desire, and then you would sew the squares together and maybe do a nice little border, and you're off to the races. I am actually saving mine for a special project, and actually I will have the tutorial for this coming up very soon. So just stay tuned for that. So you will see this guy on another project. Okay, guys, in the meantime, thank you so much for coming along. I love sharing my crochet journey with you all. If you have any questions, you know, you can always pop them down in the comment box down below, or you can email me directly at info@crochetcrafty.com. We also now have a monthly newsletter where you'll find at least one free crochet pattern every month. And we just kind of go over some of the shenanigans and projects we've been working on throughout the month there. And of course, you know, you can always find me on Instagram at The Stitch Sessions. All right, guys. And don't forget, if you haven't pressed that subscribe button, what are you waiting for? Come and hang out with me every Wednesday morning. I upload a new tutorial. In the meantime, guys, have a wonderful day. Happy crocheting and take care.